the world with different colleagues. I have colleagues from Australia, France, the UK a lot. And so it's just pretty great. I do marketing for the company, and I also lead on media relations for several clients across the world. Before I joined Custom PR, I used to, back in Nigeria, work with MSL, Quadrant MSL, which used to be, if you know MSL, one of the biggest public relations firms in the world. Yeah, so the Nigerian arm was Quadrant MSL. So I used to be with them. I used to lead on content, strategy, and account leads for several consumer brands. I started with a lot of consumer brands. Now, but before then, I really started my career doing, not this career, but in my previous life, I used to be a geographer, right? So I used to draw maps and things like that, and transportation systems. But I've always loved writing and communications as a hobby. I'm a published author as well. So I mean, one of my mentors just one day said, "Hey, how about you try this thing? Just there's an opportunity to do this." And I'm like, "Okay, let's take it." And here we are. It's been a journey.
Well, first of all, the most important thing I can say to everyone is objectives are everything. And so if indeed measurement practitioners are eating our lunch, then it's because our strategies don't include measurement. And interestingly, so many of us in public relations say, kind of like Will Ferrell said famously once, I was told there'd be no math. So we get afraid of numbers, and as a consequence of being afraid of numbers, somebody is going to step forward and come to our clients and say, we want to be able to evaluate how well your communication activities are footing to your business results. And if we don't do that as PR practitioners, if our strategy isn't inclusive of measurement and embracing of research and embracing of continuous evaluation, then we deserve to lose our place at the table. For those of us who have served on both the client side and on the sell side, agency side, we have to be guided by our strategy, which is one reason why it is that I have worked tirelessly to try and improve the lot of measurement inside the strategy itself. The measurement practitioners are essential because of the specialization that they do. And we as public relations people should be partnering with measurement practitioners if indeed we're not able to perform those services ourselves. And let's face it, we live in a world around the world. We live in a world of fewer resources, of lower budgets, of more difficult remits that we try to bring to our clients. And if we don't do it, somebody else will, and we would deserve whatever it is we get.
Yes, I'm with you. Okay, not very far from what Sean has said. I think that, of course, we know what measurement and evaluation means. And what it typically means is you're assessing the success or failure of your programs. All right. So how do you measure? You start by defining your goal and then your objectives, like Sean has said. If you do not have your objectives right, you can't measure, because of your measurement and evaluation simply you're trying to access what you have set out in your objectives. So I am of the opinion that um, our concern as practitioners should not be on whether, you know, our lunch is being taken away from us. Our concern should be, how do we even access properly our PR programs, and then how do we get investment in public relations measurement, because that's an area which has suffered, because a lot of the data we deal with, of course, are soft data. So for instance, marketing can tell you how many products they've sold, maybe through a toll-free line or through a customer care line. HR, on the other hand, can come and provide a breakdown of cost per unit per employee. But for PR, all right, we shouldn't be bothered about, because if you do not measure, then what are you talking about? How do you even prove your worth in the organization? I don't think it's about, you know, professionals, or if they are professionals that have that state of mind, then I think that they are getting it wrong. All right, because measurement and evaluation are a large part of what we do in PR. And if you're not doing measurements, if you're not measuring, if you're not evaluating, then you haven't started your public relations practice. That's how I'm putting it in summary. If you do not measure, if you do not evaluate your work as a PR practitioner, then you haven't started the profession.
I promise I've never taken the job away from a PR professional. We work together, and we should. Many PR agencies, big and small, already have amazing analytics and insights teams inside their organization, because measurement and evaluation, as rightly put, it's super important in the planning stage. It's an absolute prerequisite for a successful PR team. And agencies like ours, who focus on the measurement and evaluation side, we don't compete with PR agencies. We don't do the strategy. We don't do the actual tactical communication. But typically, we work really well together for the benefit of our shared clients.
So I'm really not sure where that. I mean, all my career, to be very fair, I've had synergy, great synergy with measurement, right? And I think it's a key part of any public relations strategy from the outset, from onboarding. You need to have measurement. How do you measure your success? I think it's a business imperative for public relations organizations, as it were. Like, how do you measure what you're doing? Because how do you know it's been a success? Like, so I feel like it's super important to definitely measure from the outset, and you agree on these things with the clients. I think the problem might be that the clients might not be clear about what they want to perhaps measure, and that's where you as a consultant need to step in and say, these are the things we probably need to get. This is how public relations will help you achieve your business objectives, right? So I think I mean, I feel like they're complementary, right? I don't think I've ever done a campaign, at least in my career, without measurement. It's super important. So I think we work together. We're brothers and sisters, if you will. I mean, absolutely. I feel like a measurement in itself is, the short answer would be that measurement is how you show your PR value. Like, I think that's really just how you really show your value as a public relations agency to your client. And I think another angle that is not often talked about is, if you are able to really show your value with measurement to your client using the right metrics based on the objectives that you set out to achieve, it does something to the internal team as well. They're excited to be part of a big success story, because look, that's the value of, like, how do you show value if you are not measuring, right? So I think the short answer is, that's how you show your value to the client. And also, you actually keep your internal team really excited and buoyed that they're part of a big story. They're part of, you're doing good, really, if you were. Right.
So, I mean, it's like, that's a trick question, guys. I mean, we say in the Institute for PR Measurement Commission, we say that there are three sort of facets of communication and measurement. One is research that you do before. The other is evaluation that you do. Measurement that you do during your campaign to make sure you're on the right track, and evaluation is what you do at the end. So you absolutely cannot have any sort of decent strategy without research, measurement, and evaluation being part of it. And anybody who is, a senior practitioner who has spent some time out in the field working with clients knows that this is the case. The trick always has been, how do you get the client, when you're on the agency side, how do you get the client to pay for it? And for a while, if it were a separate line item on your billing, then it was easy for the client to just say, oh no, we don't need that. And I think now, and perhaps Chineze, David, and Maya can speak to this. I think now there's less resistance to actually paying for measurement, and it's because if we know according to the old joke, we know that half of our budget is wasted. We just don't know which half. And so if we do research up front, and we do measurement during and evaluation after, we have an idea of how it is we're spending our money. And then the last thing that I would say on this topic, and Chineze and David's comments to the last question are quite apropos, and that is, the old joke is, you can't manage what you don't measure. So we can debate, to the high heavens, whether measurement properly belongs within an agency or in-house, but the fact is it has to happen. And if we don't do it, if we don't do the research up front before we start our campaign, then we're doing less than turning around and throwing darts at a dartboard behind our back. It is, you have to know. One of the aphorisms, I have a couple of aphorisms that I'm, quote, internet famous for. One is, all marketing is communication, but not all communication is marketing, and that's me being an old internal comms guy. But also the old the aphorism that I'm famous for is, if you can't manage it if you don't measure it. So I really don't see any sort of tension that needs to exist. When it comes to measurement, it's essential. We measure not only to prove, but to improve. I mean, we do the measurement so that we can get better at what we do.
Agree with everything that has been said so far, and I guess the only thing I can add, if we have to split measurement and evaluation services outside of the communication aspect, then agencies that are pure play measurement evaluation partners basically can help PR firms by offloading them with this kind of more technical tasks of measuring and collecting data, reporting, producing reports and scorecards, so that PR professionals can focus on the PR tactics, on communicating, on strategizing. So this is how we get to be valuable partners, and this is how we can help PR teams prove the value of their communication investments, be it for their clients if they're on the agency side, or senior leadership if they are in-house PR teams.
Okay, so measurement and evaluation. Okay, so that question is how does measurement and evaluation contribute to the growth? Okay, okay. So I think one of the ways uh, it does is by we practitioners, if we're able to prove the worth of our PR efforts. I tell my students at Simon Page School of Marketing who take public relations, research and planning that because a lot of times you get questions like, what do you people even do? What value do you add? We can't we can't touch what you bring to the table. We can't feel it. We don't, all those sort of questions. So I always say you have to prove the worth of your PR efforts. And I usually prefer three ways. One is by showing how your activities has helped the organization to cut costs, because a lot of times we don't measure all of these things. There are a lot of efforts we put into the organization, or to we some of the things we do for our clients that we don't really measure. So if you're able to prove how your PR efforts have helped to cut costs, if you're able to show what reputation risk PR has helped the organization to reduce, and if you're also able to highlight how your PR activities have generated some sort of income for the organization, then of course that way you are able to prove your worth, and then of course PR will naturally grow. And I think if you're able to do all of that, it gives you a seat at the table, because a lot of times locally here, we don't really get a lot of recognition, given the kind of work we do. So PR can grow if we're able to prove the worth of what we do in the public relations space. And it can only start by measuring. You need to measure. You need to make a conscious effort to measure. Measure the intangible things, measure the tangible things, whatever it is you can measure to be able to prove that you bring value to the table, and then you get the recognition, and then public relations will grow at the end of the day.
Well, number one is most certainly any type of advertising value equivalence. I'm sure all of our colleagues and co-panelists here are going to agree with this. In all shapes and formats, they keep on coming back after being banished in some other iteration. But basically, the most important thing is a monetary value to be assigned to PR is always risky, tricky, and misleading. Advertising value equivalents are most certainly not the value of PR. I'm sure Sean can elaborate on this, and so I'll leave this to him. And then I'll take two more purely quant-based impressions on social media. Impression counts, and as a separate number, to me is always quite meaningless. Impression count does not mean people were impressed. This metric, if used at all, needs to always be linked to more meaningful metrics of active behavior. Let's say engagement and engagement rates, sentiment, views and view rates, or click and click-through rates. So something that has been done as a result of a certain exposure to a certain message. And then I think probably the one that I see most ubiquitously still is some elements of opportunities to see or similar hyperinflated metrics based on summed up monthly visitors to web pages. This to me has always been a ridiculous metric, and even more so now when more and more alternatives that are article level data are available on the market. It's a much better and more meaningful metric and tells a more accurate story of media visibility and potential audience exposure.
I mean, so Maya just stole my answers, but I'll just elaborate, like, because it's pretty much, I mean, every year since the Barcelona conference in 2010 has been discarded as something we shouldn't be using anymore because it really doesn't show the value of our work by any standards. You know, it's just a quantity of things. It doesn't really show the quality. It's not a qualitative measure by any standard. So, I mean, I totally agree that is something that's on the list of things I should trash. I think my next one would be reach. So reach is a bit more stupid, if I would say, than impressions, because it's just a weird aggregation. When I decided to go into to find out what is reach, so I mean on social media, for instance, they aggregate even the followers, you know, the potential followers of every person that has supposedly seen it. Like, so you could have reach of long campaigns, and then the tool will give you reaches of things like 1 billion, and you're like, well, how many people are in this country for starters? But you see, because it's aggregating the people that have got 10,000 followers, 1,000 followers, and it's just counting it, but they won't see it necessarily. So I think that's actually very, very vanity metrics. And I think impressions will be the last one. However, what I think, again, if I go a bit deeper, is the fact that these metrics are not useless by themselves. But I feel like we need to question the data. We need to investigate them. What does it mean? What else? What other insights can we draw from it? You know, like she did say, what are the, I'll call them, so action metrics, sort of like, so what are the things? What are the engagements? What are the actual things we could take or learn from this, right? Is there a geographical spread? Is there, you know, sort of like, oh, key message and narration? What exactly are the people actually doing with this vanity metrics? That's what's important. So people, we need to really move from those three, in my opinion. There's a few more, but yeah, those are my top three.
Okay. AV. It's it's a no. So just agreeing with what what Maya and David had said. Another ridiculous vanity metric for me is page views. You know, I don't understand how you will use page views to maybe determine how cool you are or how well you're doing as an organization. I've seen likes. Hello, when I like you or when I follow you, once I see something, I might not even read it, I'll like it. That doesn't mean I have, I have taken in what you have said. And then clicks as well. All of those things, downloads, doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. So in addition to what Maya and David has said, yeah, these ones come out as well as vanity metrics that we should never, well, we can use them like David said, but they are not to be taken seriously. All right, they are just good for building up the numbers. I think these vanity metrics are actually good when you want to wow maybe your audience and you say, oh, we had 1 million views or 1 billion, even though I will think through to say, okay, like David said, how many people do you have that you're giving us all those kind of things? How many people do you have on Twitter, for instance, when you say you had how many billion, all those kind of things. So they are nice, but they are just there for numbers' sake. That's all what they are good for. That's it for me.
Yeah, easy. This is easy. Certainly AVE, for all the reasons that have been explored here, and I dropped in the chat, there are some things that deserve to go straight into the dustbin, and AVE is one of them. I'm really glad to hear that we're all in agreement here. We're all friends, and we all agree it's a stupid metric. I also share Chindaze's thoughts about likes. you know, we were desperately looking for something to measure in social media, and because we could measure those things, we measure them, and they don't really matter because it's too much of a low investment to click that like button, and you want, you know, a higher level of it, and we like to summarize this in talking about the 3 outs. Outputs, which is getting likes, is an output. It's the easiest and most basic sort of measurement you can make. Then you have outtakes. What happens as a consequence of the output? And then after the outtakes come the outcomes, the communication outcomes. So are we changing the way people think? Are we changing what they know? Are we changing what they do? And those sorts of things, that progression of going from the least involved to the most involved is what is most important, obviously, with the exception of just one thing, and that's business impact. So we can't look at any of the vanity metrics we've talked about over the course of the past few minutes and say conclusively that any of those things actually impact the operation and performance of the business. They instead are mere descriptions of what it is we're capable of observing. And I always go back to our friend Katie Payne. Katie Payne, one of the great measurement practitioners of all time. And Katie says that the worst vanity metric is hits. She says that's how idiots track success, as an acronym, hits. And so any of these things that seem like hits are just completely useless metrics that don't do anything for us. Oh boy. So we're back. I'll dive into this one first. So part of the reason is that it's expressed in dollar figures. And so there is the sort of desperate need for quantitative metrics that seem like they fit with other quantitative metrics in the organization. And Maya can probably speak to this as well. You know, the problem with AVE is we talk about, oh, we got X million dollars worth of space or time, but if we actually look at what underpins that idea, then we find out that earned media is completely different than paid media. And so, you know, we have utter control over our messaging when we buy it. We don't have control over earned media. And in social media, which is really a shared media, in social media, we don't have to pay for a lot of things, and the advertising that exists in social is completely different than what we get organically. So we wind up with this unholy sort of stew of mixed up metrics that don't mean anything, but to somebody who sits in the C-suite and is used to living in a world of data and finance, it seems accurate. It seems right. And I think that seeming is what really holds us back. And that's part of what we grapple with and try to find metrics that are appealing to the C-suite without necessarily being AVE.
Yeah, can I add that? Yeah, I like to add that. Okay, I've had a client. Of course, I wouldn't call the client's name. We ran a campaign for them, and then after we had the evaluation, there was a feeling that they weren't satisfied, if I must say that, because they had a lot of, like we say here, they had a lot of old school that they didn't understand, that they didn't understand the concept of outtakes, outcome, and all of that. What they wanted was they wanted the show and tell. So eventually, when we realized this wasn't working, we did AV for him and AV for them, and they were quite happy. But I wasn't going to work that way. So eventually, we resigned the account, because you can't be moving moving the conversation 10 years back. You know, we're looking at how to measure, you know, how you've changed people's behaviors, how you've changed their opinions, how you've changed their values, which is what public relations is all about. And then you come and insist that I use advertising value equivalent to measure, but advertising, they don't use any PR value equivalent to measure what they do. So why will we use advertising value equivalent to measure what we do? You know, so I think sometimes some clients are set in their way. They want things done in a particular way. And then it depends on who is working with them and how you're able to tackle them. Because this kind of thing, you might just maybe just give them what they want, but it's not, that's not how it should be done. It's not a professional thing to do.
Nothing to it.
No, just totally agreeing with them. That's all.
Yeah, sure. I mean, reasonable influencer platforms and influencer engagement tools would offer you some metrics of something akin to a return on investment on a certain influencer engagement. So it would be how something that is promoted by influencer would then eventually lead to a certain consumer behavior. Maybe it will be clicking to a website or to an online shop, or using a discount code that is provided by that influencer. So there are many ways to track how effective a certain influencer is. And some ad and PR agencies who are working more focused with in more focused fashion with influencers have amazing ways to prove this and to measure how exactly a certain influencer is impacting the bottom line. Sometimes the most effective influencer engagements are not the ones with the people who are, you know, with the highest follower count on Instagram or whatnot. So it's really, it also depends, of course, on the proficiency of the communicators to choose wisely and to recommend to their clients wisely who are the influencers that are going to be most impactful.
Yeah, Maya's absolutely right, and I would just add to her comment. The trend that I'm seeing is toward what we might call micro influencers. You know, certainly the headline view is, oh, I got Kim Kardashian to mention my brand, but increasingly the top influencers are paid strategy. I mean, you need to cross their palms with silver to get them to work with your brand, or you have to at least be able to offer them something, you know, extraordinary for it. But in the micro influencer world and in B2B, you can certainly find, using some of the tools that our friends in the pure measurement agencies use, you can find people who fit not only your brand but also your segment and your industry, and will actually have a positive impact on your sales. And this is the thing, is we in part, some of the inferiority complex that PR has had with respect to advertising and marketing has been that advertising and marketing focus on building sales, whereas we in PR tend to focus on creating the conditions that make sales possible and supporting these other elements of the peso model, as Jenny Dietrich calls it. So we're trying to make sure that the reputation of the organization, that the people who are decision makers hear the information and perceive the information about our brands in order to put us into the conversation set, so that then we can get into the consideration set. If we're not in the conversation, we can't be considered. So what we need to do in the influencer side of things is find people who are actually going to be impactful in that way. And that means we don't chase the ones with the most followers. We don't chase the ones where we have to pay too much. Instead, we try to find the right ones. Does that sound familiar? It's called strategy. And that in influencers, we got to have strategy as well as we do for every other tactic that we implement.
Yes, happy to. I mean, Maya, absolutely spot on. I mean, everything you said are my personal sentiments, and just Sean has even landed with another like layer to it, which is the fact that because I've done a lot of influencer engagement in my career, and what you find is that from the outset, the client has names already, right? They think this is a brand fit, but the clients are not professionals, right? And so what I find is sometimes you need to push back and say, look, this is going to cost you an arm and 2 legs, right? And then at the end of the day, you get a lot of awareness, but then everybody knows, nobody knows what I say. Like, so what you need to know is say, look, who are the guys that really need to know? And what is their digital footprints? Where do they really go? Who are the guys? Like, what is the conversation? It's a bit deeper than just saying this looks like a good name to use for the brand, right? So it's a lot of work from a strategy standpoint, like Sean just rightly said. You need to do a lot of thinking and saying, these are the guys that this is the audience, the target audience. These are the guys that they really would listen to, right? I don't think a big influencer drinking something would convince me to necessarily drink it. Like, so you need to really check and find out who are the guys, right? And when you find those guys, you'll be surprised. They've got just 15,000 followers, sometimes 30,000 followers, but massive translation when it comes to the results you're going to get from those sort of engagements. So absolutely spot on, guys. I mean, to be honest, I mean, we could talk about this, but it is a part. I feel like you can't even separate public relations from measurement and evaluation in itself. Because how do you show your success? How do you even know you've been? It's like playing a football match, and then you finish the game and you're not sure what the scores is. Like who won? Like what exactly happened? You need to really. That's really how I see it. You cannot separate both of them. And if there's, I mean, I don't know of any PR agency. I'll be shocked if there are PR agencies today that work without actually considering evaluation. And you see, the interesting thing is that evaluation comes from the get-go, from the beginning. Because sometimes, like we said this earlier, but sometimes clients have different objectives and they want to just achieve this. And sometimes it's really unrealistic. And so it's at the beginning you start to say, look, this is how I'm going to evaluate the success of this campaign. Based on, yes, you have this business objective, but these are my PR objectives to help you achieve your business objectives, right? And so we need to just really, I mean, everything borders on strategy at this point, to be very honest. And it's always great to agree at the outset. These are the things I'm going to measure. I'm not going to be, yes, there'll be impressions, yes, there'll be reach, but that's not what I really want to measure, because that doesn't really tell me that I've changed a perception. Like we're in the business of impact and influence, I like to say often. So have I impacted anybody? Have I influenced someone to make a different choice? Have I moved you up your consideration set? If you're, I mean, I've worked with one of the brands in Nigeria called P&G, and the challenge they had at the time was one of the products where, it had dropped, right? And they needed to sort of come back up. And so when they came to how do you want to measure this campaign, what we said to them is, look, we want to make sure that you get up the consideration set. You used to be number 1, you fell to number 3. If I can get you to number 2, right, then I think that's, and they're like, okay. So yes, we got impressions, we got all that, but truthfully, we had to tell them, for us to really measure, we need to really see what the data is. And they agreed. And we were successful. We came back to number 1. And so that made a lot of sense. So these are the real conversations. Without measurement, we wouldn't do that. Thank you. That's my thoughts on that one.
It anyway is, even if you can imagine a type of PR team that would not ever use any sort of data or measure, at the end of a campaign, if they say we did a great job, this is already some sort of evaluation, right? However, if you just say we did a great job, it's plainly an opinion. If you have data to prove it, then this is measurement and evaluation. So the data side is super important, and it never should be that scary. There's so many tools that help you, even if you don't feel like a numbers person. There's so many tools out there that can help you. So the most important thing is measurement and evaluation is an integral part of PR, and nobody should feel intimidated by numbers or percentages. This is just part of your everyday life. It's the piece of the cake, it's the piece of the pizza. It's all a percentage, right? So I hope with more events like this, and hopefully with more audiences from the PR space joining and listening in, they will feel less intimidated by something as scary as a number.
Yeah, I've been as we say, kibitzing in the chat over here, but yeah, I mean, all I know is that all I know and learned in my career, which is like really amazing. I've been doing this for nearly 30 years, and which is a real trick since I'm only 39 years old. But I've been doing this for so long that I remember when the very idea of measurement was just scoffed at. And there was a CEO that I was talking to, and he said, well, you can't measure the impact of what you do in communication because you're not quantitative. And I said, well, some of us are quantitative. And he, who had a bachelor's degree in mathematics, said, we can test this theory. And I said, I'm happy to have it. Let's go. And when we did a research study and we looked at, for example, in internal communication, which we haven't spent much time on today, but when we looked at the impact of our internal communication, and we discovered, how much we were actually changing in some cases anywhere from 12 to 15 percentage points over the course of a year, changing the perception of value of the company to its employees, and B, the advocacy on the part of the employees, and C, also seeing tremendous increases in knowing the content of the business strategy. Which means that they tended to make decisions that were more in line with strategy than without. Once we began measuring those things, then the CEO said, you don't have to convince me that communication is important. You just have to convince me that what you're doing is having an impact, and you've done that. So, if we talk about measurement and evaluation and research being intrinsic to strategy, and we keep our focus on the fact that it is intrinsic to strategy. We don't have strategy if we don't have those things. Then we will be extremely successful at inculcating a measurement into the PR practice, and we won't have the resistance that we do. The last thing that I would say on this topic is that there's so much of the measurement that we do that's so focused on proving, and I mentioned this a little earlier. It's so focused on proving what we do that we miss the fact that research, measurement, evaluation is a source of intelligence. It enables us to make better decisions, just like research does in every other aspect of business. If we're able to do that, then we prove our value, because our value isn't limited only to a singular outcome. Instead, it's linked to various communication outcomes throughout the organization that all contribute to the success of the business at large.
I am. Okay, I liked what Maya said. So whether you like it or not, or whether you believe it or not, measurement and evaluation is an integral part of public relations. If not, why do you have evaluation in the two PR campaign models we have? You have the RPI, research, programming, implementation, and evaluation. The RACE model, you have research, action, communication, and evaluation. So what are we talking about? So if it's not important, if it's not an integral part of public relations, then why is it there? All right, so measurement and evaluation, they play very key roles in, in the entire communication communication strategy generally, because without measurement and evaluation, no one can judge whether the strategy was executed efficiently or effectively. There's no way you can do that. All right. So, but what I will, however, add, in addition to what Sean had said, is in your measurement and evaluation, I think there must be a clear reason why you're measuring, and then you must also know what you're measuring and how much time and effort you're going to put in the measurement. I think all that will help you in the measurement process. Thank you.
In political communication, do you mean in political communication? Well, in any case, I mean, elections are usually a matter of political communication, unless, of course, there is another aspect of public communication, such as authorities encouraging voters to register or voters to turn up for elections. So there are many aspects. So we have to basically choose a scenario where we can look at what we can. So if you are let's say an NGO encouraging wider participation in voting or voter education, if there is a change in the voting mechanism, are you moving away from paper ballots to machine voting, things like this, then communication would be very campaign specific with very clear messages and rather clear objectives. So it would be quite measurable. Of course, if you are a political participant in the elections and you're trying to win over votes, then there is one very, very clear set of metrics that would prove whether you were successful or not and how many votes you got.
Yes, I think I'll just give a quick thoughts, because I mean I've actually worked on a few political campaigns in locally in Nigeria, and I think when it comes to your question was before, during, after, right? So I mean, I think already you would see that the Nigerian Twitter space is flooded with political communications. People are, you know, talking everywhere, and different campaign teams are coming up with different propaganda arms and angles and things like that. And you know, when I worked on a campaign, I think the important thing that we did was to sort of we had a tool that was literally scrolling the space to sort of pick out the sentiments, right? So when it comes to political campaigns, the share of voice and the sentiment analysis is very important, I do think. So you need to sort of measure before the campaign starts, right? To say, okay, what are the conversations about this person? To sort of get the sentiment before campaign starts. So when the campaign starts, you now want to start measuring what are the sentiments of the people generally, and you would have a lot of those when you just, you know, use a tool like one of the ones like Talkwalker or Meltwater. You just sort of get that graph to show you, okay, and you can see where the conversations are, and those conversations, like Sean said, could actually lead to intelligence. So you could see people actually taking up your client sort of on the concept of education. And so you now go back and say, look, and that's how it feeds off. Like, okay, we need to do something about education. So you're getting intelligence from those conversations mid-campaign even. And of course, post-campaign, whether you win or you don't win, I mean, you need to now come up with a communication strategy to say, okay, how do we now meander through, we won, what do we want to say? Or we didn't win, what do we want to say? So it's just a whole, like, it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. We could have an entire conversation about political communications in itself.
I think I take a slightly different comment to say, not only are you measuring what you have online, I think you should also measure what you have offline, because we do know that majority of voters from where we come from, and Sean and Maya, they are where you have a lot of, you know, but we have the grassroots people here who are not online. So the kind of messaging or the kind of messaging you put out should also reach the grassroots level as well. So all of that should be measured before, well, before, maybe not a, yeah, before, because that's when you're trying to get them to vote, right? So those things are.
Wow. What everybody else said. This is right. The only thing, I dropped this in the chat. Message integrity is the big deal in political comm, because you can have, and we're not talking about, I mean, just as Chineze said, we have to remember that not every market is the same. And so, for example, here in Northwestern Ohio, we have 2 universities within close proximity, and we have a fair number of people who are online, but we also have an elder population, people who aren't. And so we continue to rely, especially for political communication here, we continue to rely a lot on radio and television to reach these people. Even the weekly and daily newspapers that are here, something as simple as going to coffee shops and talking to people is still a very important part of how it is that political communication occurs, even here in the States. And so in other places, you have to have a very strong consideration for how it is you're going to reach people who aren't tied to these devices, and in political communication, it's even more important. The last comment on political comm and the whole idea is we know that a lot of times, if we're representing a certain politician, for example, or a cause, we will not be in absolute control over the message all the time unless we purchase. So when we're in the grassroots looking in the shared space, then we need an ongoing program of evaluation in that shared space. We need to make sure that we're constantly examining, as David said, for trends. If something comes around, with respect to education, as something comes around with respect, to fake news, we need to have our finger on the pulse of that. And that's why I keep talking about those 3 sort of heads of the pin, dancing on the heads of a pin. Research, evaluation, and measurement all go together, and they occur at different times of the campaign.
I really don't, like I mentioned earlier, I really don't know how a practitioner or is a supposed public relations practitioner is not measuring, is not evaluating their campaigns. So why are they not measuring? Probably because they haven't been tasked with the responsibility of proving, maybe of showcasing the success of their campaign. That means they just have campaigns, there's no accountability. All right, so maybe people haven't held them accountable. That's the only reason, that's the only thing I think might be the reason why, people will leave it as an afterthought. Because if it's part of your planning process, it should be part of, because that you don't only evaluate, you don't only take stock at the end. Remember that sometimes you might have to, come in between to check that what you're doing is correct. And then if you need to fix something, you fix it, because leaving it at the end that might not work well for you. So I think that's the only reason why I think that maybe somebody is leaving that as an afterthought. Maybe they don't know. That might be another case. They don't realize how important it is for them to have measurement and evaluation, or they just don't think it's important because they haven't been held accountable, or they are not accountable to people as well. Because another thing is to have campaigns not to measure or to leave it as an afterthought because you're not accountable to anybody. So fine, you can go ahead and wing it like we say here.
Well, I mean, I think fear is a big part of it. You know, fear is a very powerful driver, as we know. And I had one boss years ago who said, why in the world would we go to all the trouble of trying to measure these things? Because what if it turns out that what we're doing isn't working? And I mean, I'm still, to this day, 25 years later, I'm still like, what? That's the whole reason. That's one of the big reasons you do it. You know, it's like, yeah, we don't want to do things that aren't effective. We don't want to do things that waste money. And so that whole concept that was intrinsic to it, shall we say, and I'm a member of an earlier generation now myself, but an earlier generation that was afraid. They were afraid because if they found out that what they were doing wasn't working, they'd have to do something else. And they're very comfortable where they are. The other thing that enters into it is being in a rut. You know, when you're driving in a car in the snow, and well, I'm talking to people in Africa. You have snow at the top of your mountains. You don't have to drive through snow like we do, but you're in the rut, and you can't deviate. You can't go to a different path because you're stuck in these ruts. Some people get stuck in the rut, and they think they know. They believe they know what's actually happening and what works, but they don't have any evidence to support it, and so they're just shocked when they lose resources or they lose budget or they're not able to replace someone who leaves. And that's, so part of the reason for research, measurement, and evaluation is to make sure that you're making the business case, you know, for the function that you represent. And if you're in an agency and you're not measuring, then heaven help you, because you know you're not going to continue with clients if they don't know what it is that is working and not working. So I think those twin points, you know, either fear of being found out wrong, or the fear of deviating from the ruts that you're in and the familiar, are what account for a lot of that anguish and resistance.
I mean, I think you can't, like I did say before, you can't separate the two. And I'll be brazen to say, if you're practicing public relations and you're not measuring, you're not practicing public relations. You know, because how do we measure that? How do we know you've actually influenced? It's about, like, our work is really about influencing people's behaviors and, you know, sort of doing things like that. So how do you want to measure that? And like I think Chinese did say, our measurement is not necessarily hard, it's sort of soft, right? So but then there are ways to do it. And so yes, it's a bit tricky, and yes, you can't use the same measurement and evaluation tactic across board for all clients because they want different things, you know, and it's a bit tricky sometimes, but I feel like it's a worthwhile investment that, you know, PR agencies should definitely make, you know, either partnering with people like Maya, P Plus and things, or if you are able to, if you have the resources, you know, you have some tools in-house to do that, or a team in-house that actually is dedicated to doing stuff like that. That's really just what makes sense for me when it comes to public relations and measurement. You can't decimate both of them.
I will reframe the question. So I don't think some public professionals perceive measurement and evaluation as an afterthought. I think most public relations professionals have matured to perceive measurement and evaluation as an integral part of the process and their work. But what happens if public relation professionals perceive measurement and evaluation as an afterthought? And my answer is, if that's the case, then all you are going to achieve is a report for filing. This is just going to be something that retrospectively summarizes a certain activity, counts what can be counted, a report, a snapshot of some metrics that you deem important. They're just, in essence, already historic metrics. You don't get to learn from them. You don't get to improve. So this is why it should not be an afterthought. Well, I think we are all on the same page here. The panel is in a complete synchron. We are all agreeing that proper evaluation is part of any successful campaign and any successful communication strategy. It's part of PR itself. So you would always set your goals, and you always need to set your goals and objectives. You need to measure progress, and this can help you achieve those goals and objectives and tailor your approach. And in the end, you need to link the results to the initial goals. And basically, this all helps you report and prove your success and impact to your clients or to your bosses in an in-house setting. And so to all PR professionals who are not yet fully on board with this measurement and evaluation thing, but basically, if you can't measure and prove the value of your work as a professional, you will sooner rather than later be kicked out of business by your competitors who do it. So if you haven't started yet, there is a way to quickly catch up. And I think the first thing I would say is check out amecorg.com, where you will find amazing free educational resources. Check Sean's blog, educate yourself and your staff, so you can be set for measurement and evaluation success.
My advice is, because I'm going to latch at what Sean said. I think, okay, fine, fear, but what are you scared of? If you find out that you're not doing the right thing, then you need to change. You need to re-strategize. So for me, it is, if you haven't been evaluating, if you haven't been measuring, now it's time to start. Okay, so start measuring your PR efforts, start measuring and evaluating your campaigns. And like I tell my students in Simon Page, evaluation is not to hit yourself hard, all right? Evaluation is for you to improve on your next campaign. You measure, you evaluate so that you can improve on your next campaign, because learnings from that particular campaign can help you improve on your next campaign. So why not go ahead and measure and evaluate so you know how to improve on whatever you're doing? And then you don't measure, you don't evaluate. How do you know that you're, when you're asked that question, okay, what do you bring to the table, or what impact is your unit? Because typically we're relegated to the background in most organizations here locally. So you're relegated to the background already, and then you're not measuring, you're not evaluating. How do you now want to gain the recognition? How do you want to gain a seat on the table? So that's it. Please go out, measure your campaigns, evaluate, and all will be well, I hope.
The biggest advice is stop being a child. Children will say, I don't want to do that, it's not fair. I don't want to do that, I don't like math. It's like, wait a minute, we're adults here. Every other component of business uses facts and data to make decisions and take action. We have to be no different than that. We've got to embrace the data and make decisions based on that data. If we don't make data-driven decisions, then we're worse than useless to the organizations we serve.
Yeah, just piggybacking off the conversation and the responses, I do think that like with everything, data is the lifeblood of public relations. I like to say, I think I wrote a blog about that recently. Like, data is the lifeblood of public relations, and of course, measurement and evolution is how you're able to really achieve it. For instance, if you do not know your target audience, like this is something I stress a lot. If you do not know who your target audience is, then what kind of messaging are you even putting out there, right? So just as important as that's how important it is to definitely measure. And if you're not measuring, well, start. That's just it. Just start. And what I've heard, if it's about fear, right? If you're worried about actually falling short of the target, then you need to approach it with an agile methodology. So in an agile framework, like they do say, you need to always go back and reiterate. And we're in the communication space, so be open with your client and communicate it and say, look, we're going this way, but we've seen this mid-campaign and this is what's going on. Be agile. You don't just say because you said it's going to be this way, then you have to. So you need to be more agile and flexible, as it were, in that tech, to borrow the tech lingo, that is.
So you really can't measure the sales without the data. What you can measure, though, is you can measure the contributors to sales. So cast your mind back to the 3 outs that I talked about, the outcomes, outtakes, and outputs. All right. So ideally, we'd look at the business impact and the business impact of the sales figures. But we can ask ourselves, and we do this when we do strategic planning, right? We can ask ourselves, what is it from a communication standpoint that will contribute to sales, that we know is going to contribute to sales? And maybe, that is, a share of voice, maybe that's traffic to web pages, maybe that's a number of other sorts of things. We can brainstorm what those things are. And then we can measure that. So at the very least, we're creating the conditions that should lead to sales. We can look at things like, on the outtake level, we can look at things like branded search traffic. A very underused sort of metric in public relations is branded search. Because if you look, for most brands, the bulk of their traffic comes branded. It's not often, unless it's a challenger brand, it's not often that you're gonna find that most of your traffic comes in organically. Instead, it's gonna come either from advertising, or it's gonna come in from people who already know who you are. If you're like me, you may encounter an online ad, and instead of clicking the ad, you'll actually Google the brand and then go and look at what it is they have. So you're not being tied in, you're not getting a cookie that's going to serve you ads later on. So if we use the 3 outs structure and we say, here's sales that we're trying to get to, and here, what are the contributors, direct contributors to sales? What are the things that make those things happen, the outtakes? And then what are the outputs we have to do? I mean, we can't have share of voice if we don't create content. So there's things we can do, and we can have metrics and objectives and have quantitative evaluation of what it is that's happening there, and we can look at it on an ongoing basis. So I think it all comes back to strategy, and it all comes back to setting up objectives that are quantitative.
Can I? Yeah, I wanted to. When I saw that question, and I was, I think my reaction was run away from objectives that say increase sales of products as a PR person, because there are a lot of variables that contribute to increase in sales of products, and that might not be under the control of public relations. So things like price, product quality, availability of products, and all of that. So unless the PR person is able to isolate and show that maybe it was the variable that moved the needle on sales, right? Maybe the positive publicity in one market that showed maybe increase in sales, and all of that. If you're able to prove that while other marketing, all the other elements of the marketing mix remain the same, then if you're not able to prove that, then please run away from objectives that say increase in sales. Rather, like Sean said, there are other things, increase in awareness and all of that are things that you have control over. So why are you going to delve into increase in sales as a PR person as your objective? Because you must have, maybe your client will force you to say, okay, increase in sales by 20% or 40% or whatever. And then like the comment said, they're not even giving you the, what do you call it now, the numbers to work with. So it doesn't make sense at all. So
perfectly put by all of the speakers. No need to repeat. I absolutely agree. Basically, what as communicators need to carefully talk to with their clients is really make sure that they're aligning the right objectives to the activities, and then make sure that they can align the outputs, outtakes, and outcome metrics, and how they lead to this desired impact, be it sales or anything else.
Yes, I mean, I've actually been there. I mean, Chinese was absolutely spot on. Like, I've been there. We've had a client who wanted to do a Christmas campaign. They were in the business of selling children's clothes, and they just said, look, we want to make 100 million. Figure it, like, want to make 100 million. Like, okay, so you need to let us know how much you made first week of the campaign. And we started this whole Google ads. We're doing Instagram influencers and everything. And what we realized was that we're getting footfalls, but then the clothes were too expensive for the target audience, right? So you see, it wasn't just aimed on, were we getting the footfalls, or are we getting people to the stores? Yes, they said people are coming, but they're not buying. How is that a PR problem? So I do feel that, and then we ran into a lot of problems with the client back then. But I do feel like if at the outset, like Chinese said, we had sort of like, look, this is not contingent on us. There are too many other factors that lead to this objective. So you can't put this objective solely on PR. Like, it's not even a PR objective, to be honest. Sales, once I see a client that does that, I mean, I just like, you're not ready. Go get an advertisement agency and get marketing people to do that. That's not me. That's not what I do. And so I tell you, and I'm happy to walk away, right? Because I mean, I chase excellence in what I do. So I don't want to go because I'm trying to get money and then I go do something I know I can't handle. Sometimes it's even customer service. It's terrible customer service from the people. The bounce rate could be high when they come to the site. I mean, there's so many things that could happen that to lead to low sales. But then you're doing your job of getting people there, but then they're not able to convert them. So I just want to share that experience.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello. Yeah, hello. Good afternoon. Yeah, I I initially raised up my hand, but I decided to just put it down. But now that I have called me, I just have to talk. Okay. I'm so appreciative of this session. I know that you made mention of the fact that it's the first time, but it's so loaded that it's not looking like as if it's the first. I must commend the team. I must commend all the speakers. They are really doing so good. I like the spice that you all added to it. You really put life into this PR and measurement. And my comments also bother around the fact that I don't see reason for PR companies to be agitated, or better still, to feel funny about partnering with measuring companies, agencies. It's all about collaboration, just like all of you have rightly shared, because it's a win-win. We all have to work together. We as a company, we have never see that as competitive. We see it as partnerships, and it's a teamwork. So it's a good thing you're talking about it, and I want to just encourage other PR agencies that are here to please partner more and more with measuring community because it's very important. It's something that we can't shy away from. I love the fact that Chineze was able to talk about the increase in sales objective that we need to shy away from that or run away from it, kind of. It's something that in the past, it's more or less, was leading to something that wasn't too okay with clients. And, it's by you're unable to now prove that, oh, their sales has been increased, especially with the fact that we are made to know now that if they want us to look at so many other elements, especially the objective, they need to also work with us, especially the sales unit or department, for us to be able to know what their sales results are at that point in time, and then we'll be able to measure accordingly. Not that they will put us in the dark and then they expect us to perform magic. So this is an eye opener, and I'm really, really appreciative of everything that you've all said. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.
So it will go something along the lines of there's no profit without PR. Literally, PR starts the spelling of the word profit, right? And of course, how do you do that if you can't even tell? Like, how do you get profit? You count profit, right? You need to count it. That's also a thing with measurement and evaluation. You need to count it. So PR starts profit, and yes, no profit without PR.
Yeah, so so my favorite quote, a little earlier I dropped it in the chat, and it is, in God we trust, all others bring data.
Well, I have, I guess, two. One is more recent by marketing expert and best-selling author Seth Godin. He said, measurement is fabulous unless you're busy measuring what's easy to measure as opposed to what's important. And the other quote I really like is by Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain. He said, continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection.
Okay, I have two. When I'm preaching, or not outside work, I always say without proper self-evaluation, failure is inevitable. I especially use this when I take the topic of personal branding. Then, of course, the very popular quotes that you can't improve what you don't measure. So it's a no-brainer. And then, Sean, we're waiting for you to start blogging again. So please.
Thank
It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
All right.